Actually, it was during time like this, as most of you must know, that we're in the holy months of Ramadan. And it is this exact salt sitting with a couple of colleagues in actually Saudi Arabia and contemplating the fact that it's quite, during the Ramadan, was quite noticeable in ways and uncommon is that such a wide community of people actually live according to this same pattern through the fast breaking, through the prayer times, etc. And in a world where we're all looking for scalability, really, we saw that there is an opportunity. And the second thought that came in is that fine, if that's happening during Ramadan, then the Islamic community, Muslim community around the world, is there basically a potential beyond the Ramadan in itself? And that's what drove us to look at this community in its largest form. It's probably 20% of the world. It's the fastest growing religion denomination. It is basically the largest growing demographically. It's expected that by 2025, the Muslim world will represent 30% of the world population. But really, it's an opportunity to be tapped on, and there has been very few focus on really what it means to focus on that from a marketing opportunity to that Islamic world. And it's anchored really, and it's very communitarian. The concept of ummah, as it's articulated in Islam, creates really quite a gel, if I may say, community through these 5 pillars of basically the shahada, which is a profession of faith, the prayer, the charity, the fasting, and obviously the pilgrim to Mecca. That creates cohesive society in its core, which technically creates also quite a lot of set of ritual, because, as most of you must know too, that the Quran not only is a religious book, but also dictates social and individual attitudes. And this Muslim community, within the tension created by the global pressure, in a way, is more and more looking at its values and really being proud of their values, and they've been expressed in so many ways, from a very violent to a very peaceful environment. And this opportunity has not gone unseen by many marketeers, but I don't think there has been a real commitment and a real focus on developing that. If you look at actually Forbes in April 2007 estimated the halal food market at 580 billion. The Time magazine, which happened I think a month or 2 months ago, estimates the market at $1 trillion. Well, you see very few marketeers really focusing on that market. McDonald's, for example, here in Singapore, as a matter of fact, have now introduced halal foods menu. But there are attempts. You take the clothing and the cosmetic market, which is 250 million who dress according to Islamic law. But that's again should represent quite a large and quite a big opportunities to many marketeers. Actually, there is a Canadian lady who's just started a brand in Canada, a cosmetic line which is alcoholic free and so on. But people are coming in, but we don't see the big players coming in a very committed manner. Islamic banking is the fastest growing banking segment today in the world. It represents $250 billion opportunity. It's growing at 15% per annum. And even in the US, you find the apparition many Islamic banks appearing and quite actively. There is even a Dow Jones now for Islamic funding. But in a typical JWT manner, being the brand pioneers, we basically said, okay, let's look how we can really leverage all these assumptions and confirm these assumptions. And that's why we conducted the first ever research on the Islamic world. And it carried 2 aspects. One, it had to build and look at the commonalities and also identify the differences. And that was in order to really reach what I call the conceptual target, which is really our sweet spot for communication. If we believe that communication is best built on insights, then really identifying that conceptual target and how we talk to that conceptual target was our key objective to identify, and then to take it back to clients and say to them, okay, we can build on these segments. And the way we do it is by looking basically outwardly and inwardly. Outwardly through the living standards, and inwardly through basically the way they connect within their communities, be it family, friends, values, culture, etc. And it was done in a two-step, through first qualitative groups, in order to identify these commonalities and differences, and then we quantify these findings in order to be able to determine the segments on which we could build on. It was carried in the Western Hemisphere, in the UK and in the US. And then we took it to the Eastern Hemisphere where the society is predominantly Muslims. The focus of the rest of the presentation will be on the Eastern Hemisphere because that's where we are. And we covered all the large demographic countries in the Islamic world, the 10 largest actually, which actually gives us quite a broad spectrum of what's happening within that world. And the first finding, in a way, which is a very interesting finding in the sense that it confirms a lot of assumptions. That the Islamic identity for Muslims around the world is as important as their national identities. And when you look at it across these 10 countries, to the exception of Turkey and Iran are really where the religious belief and the nationalistic belief are quite tied in, you find that really most of the Muslims basically believe that they are first Muslim and then whatever they are. And that shows the high sense of identity that the religion offers because of these social norms and social values that it forces you into when you, or chose to follow when you. The other thing that needs to be resolved within the Islamic world is this tension between modernity and Islam, where many misunderstanding of Islam is based on traditional values rather than on the real religious values. And you find that there is a kind of this tension that is being created between these two, which is trying to be resolved through their mind and through being more outspoken, for example, and again, the individual opinion where that community aspect, you find out that there is an emergence of individual opinions being created, and also a sense of belonging to groups beyond the religious group. Effectively, there is a more need to move away from a self-denial by being part of the larger community, the more self-esteem where I stand on my own. And there is a greater disposal and pride within the Islamic values, and that's quite important. There is a definite preference. If you take today's Saudi Arabia, 30 years ago, Islamic banking represented only 10% of the entire banking transaction. Today, it represents 80%. If you look at the expansion of brands like HSBC Amana, for example, and their success in Malaysia or Indonesia, that's another. Plus the fact that I want to be respected in my own values and I want to be treated within, in every transaction I have by respect, through respect to my own values. Hence, for example, that many of them will leave a restaurant if they are not serving the halal food. Family, nevertheless, still plays a very important role. And it plays an important role because of that community heritage of this. And the marital insecurity still remains very high within the society. However, where young people were always, in a way, pushed on the side, and this is a phenomenon actually that is happening because of the growing literacy rate within the Islamic world. There is a great belief that the youth now, because they are better educated, their opinion is much more heard, and that's opening up a lot of opportunity, which I'll show some later on. But from all that, what we managed to do is actually identify attitudinal cluster that emerged. And these attitudinal clusters were basically based on 4 dimensions. The self, the practices, the worldviews and how do I interact with the world values, and the relationship I have within my immediate environment and my community and so on. And effectively 5 clusters emerged: the social conformists, our social conformists. They are basically in a constant state of adjustment to whatever environment dictates to them. The religious conservative, and this is a group that is very anti-media, for example, very information averse, very closed, and obviously their religious belief override any personal choice. The pragmatic strivers are the non-traditional and ambitious people that are ready to compromise on their values to basically drive their goals forward. The extreme liberals, which I think is a global group in this perspective. There are liberals everywhere, and they are quite in tune with what's happening in the world. But the most interesting group, I believe, and that's the group that is really immersed, that are really trying to address that tension between globalization, my belief, modernity, and my values, etc., and how they are in constant state of trying to balance, in a way, all these elements. And if you look at it from a global perspective, you find that effectively within the Muslim society, the people who are about progression in society, about adjusting and resolving that tension between modernity and Islam, are the dominant group. Now, we still address them in a very patronizing way in many of the communication I see, because this is an area where actually there is a lot of insights that one could build on and to really make the whole communication more effective. Obviously, they articulate differently from one market to another. Astonishingly, for example, where people from a mediatic point of view and what we know, we would think that Saudi would be the most conservative. We find that this is where the New Age Muslims are striving and growing very fast. Where in a market where the media position as a very liberal, such as Jordan, for example, we find that the religious conservatives are really dominant within that society. Because again, we have this false view of looking at the urban centers rather than the countries as a whole. Then what are the insights? And effectively, this is where many times when we think of, I don't want to call it Islamic communication, but communication to the Muslim world, we think of the arch and the moon crescents and all these cliches that people try to put forward all the time. Where really what we're advocating is, let's think outside the arch. One individual opinion, and I see so many communication of, it's always the family, the group, the compliance, and so on, where effectively in all that word, individual opinion wants to come out, wants to be expressed, and I see very, very few individual kind of assertive character in any of the communication we do. In Saudi, for example, where we have always these toned down kind of boring, toned down type of communication. These are people who are telling you, we want to change. We're in a changing time. Show me the resolution between this tension of tradition, practice, and changing times. And really, it's very interesting because societal change and progress are really driven by these new age kind of thinker. And the resistance to change is very low, and therefore the attitudinal change that we can provoke is very, very significant. And they are media friendly, they are high media consumer. And basically they are the conscious decision makers within their everyday life. In opposition, for example, in Jordan, you have a total different attitude where they believe that, and this is where the predominant rural influence comes in, where basically 65% thinks the traditional is fine and it shouldn't be changed. But you have these differences within the market. In Turkey, which is very liberal in many aspects, still the halal food thing is a sign of respect to my beliefs, and quite a significant number will leave if they are not served that halal. Egyptians are into dialogue. They really want a dialogue about the society. 1 out of 4 Egyptian internet users is a blogger, have a blog, which is phenomenal. The needs for dialogue is there, and self-expression of opinion is there. Malaysians feel the most secure about their marital life, and therefore that these reassurances that you might, where particularly in the Middle East, where you have so many kind of advertising where cook well and your husband will love you, for example, are really becomes quite irrelevant within that all these cliches that we tend to build on. Also, the way we portray youths where they are totally compliant and they are really running after the tail of their father or mother is gone. You know, let's move on from that. Plus, they are media savvy. The revolution that took place in the media and the openness that the media force upon these societies. Basically, there is a strong belief that media plays an important role of edutainment into my life. Now, at the same time, 63% of them, because they don't see a connect between their immediate, I call them edutainment needs, and what's being provoked. And I think there is an opportunity for media to really adjust to what the consumer is saying. Amazingly, again, and really here I'm trying to break the cliches that we have. In Iran, where we feel that the religious people are the leaders, the dominant, etc., where actually they are not role model for the society. It's still the teachers are the role model of the society, and that shows the dichotomy within the society, which obviously is all in the media today about what's happening with that dichotomy. In Saudi, it's a businessman that is dominates quite understandably so. Obviously, you don't have a reference to the royal. The religious are too conservative and too on the other extreme side. But effectively, what's left are the businessmen, the successful, the hype, and so on. But more importantly, I think there is an opportunity for new product development and new brand development that really talk to the Muslim consumers. And because there is a strong belief that they are reaching parity on quality, and basically they believe that 68% of all Muslim products are as good as the imported one. Also, there is a questioning of the traditional clothing. It's very interesting what's happening in Saudi, for example, on the dishwash, where you find the youth now creating variation in the way they dress. You find women, actually, this is in Saudi during the Hajj period, where there is a tendency to try to create differentiation in the clothing rather than totally complying. The contradictions and the tensions are still there, where it's very important for Indonesia to eat halal. However, only 50% think it's important to bag in an Islamic way. But again, resolving, I think, at the heart of it, understanding the tension and resolving that tension is key. For a woman believes that basically monetary achievement is as important to happiness as a happy married life. And I think that's quite understandable if you understand basically the marital status within Islam. But if we talk about the fifth of the world population, we should not rely on educated guess. The Muslim consumer is an unseen opportunity, and I think there is an opportunity to build on. There are paradoxes and paradigms to build on, and I think this research really unveiled and basically uncovered a lot of the opportunities and the insight that we can be building on. Thank you very much.